the insult didn't explode. It slid into the cabin like a blade wrapped in silk, soft at first, then unmistakably sharp. "You need to get out of that VIP seat, sir. It's reserved for passengers who belong here." Conversations froze mid-sentence. A white man in a tailored navy blazer hovered behind the flight attendant, already smirking as if the decision had been made long before Marcus Hale sat down. The overhead lights cast a pale reflection across the aisle, and for a split second the whole aircraft felt like a stage waiting for the first spotlight to hit. Marcus didn't move. He just looked up, calm, unreadable, the kind of quiet that makes people second-guess their confidence. And that was when the cabin's mood shifted, not loud, not dramatic, but with the tension of a storm holding its breath. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to Marcus Hale. Brittany, the lead attendant, stepped closer, her posture rigid with authority she thought she owned. Her lips tightened, her voice dropped just enough to sound professional while still carrying the sting of judgment. "Sir, don't make this uncomfortable. I've already told you, this seat is assigned to a priority guest." Her eyes didn't scan the ticket. They scanned Marcus's skin. The white passenger behind her exhaled impatiently, adjusting his gold cufflinks as if the metal itself confirmed his ranking in the world. "Is he really still sitting there?" he muttered, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. A nervous chuckle floated from row 3. Another passenger shifted, pulling her handbag closer without thinking. Racial bias rarely screams, it whispers, it glances, it tightens fingers around a purse strap. Marcus simply folded his hands in his lap, steady as a monument. "This is my seat," he said, voice level. Brittany laughed, a single, dismissive exhale. "Sir, VIP isn't open seating. Let's not pretend you don't know that." She reached for the boarding pass he extended to her, but instead of inspecting it, she barely flicked her eyes over the top line and snapped it between her fingers, tearing it clean in two. The rip echoed louder than any announcement over the PA system. Gasps. A phone lifted discreetly. Someone whispered, "Did she really just do that?" A trainee attendant at the galley froze. Mia Torres. Wide-eyed. Unsure. She had seen the scanner turn green when Marcus boarded. She had watched his name appear full, verified, impossible to mistake. But her supervisor's stare pinned her to the wall, warning her to stay silent. Brittany tossed the torn ticket aside. "Security's coming. You'll need to step out so our real VIP can sit." The man behind her stepped forward, already smiling like he'd won something he never earned. Marcus didn't blink. Didn't flinch. Didn't rise. Because he had seen this before. At 19, being asked if he wandered into the wrong part of an airport; at 28, mistaken for a delivery worker during a meeting he was hosting; at 40, still navigating the same old narrative written by people who never expected him to read, let alone rewrite, the script. His voice, when it finally came, was almost soft. "I told you. This is my seat." Brittany's eyes narrowed, irritated by his composure. Not for long. But the truth, one she was seconds away from learning, was that the man she was trying to remove wasn't an inconvenience. He wasn't a mistake. He wasn't a misplaced passenger. He was Marcus Hale, majority investor of the airline, silent architect of its success, and the single person with the authority to end every career standing against him. And in minutes, he would. Marcus did not rise. He stayed anchored in the VIP seat as the air in the cabin thickened into something sharp enough to taste. Brittany stood in front of him with the confidence of someone who believed the entire aircraft would back her judgment. The white passenger waiting behind her shifted his weight, impatient and entitled, as if Marcus's existence in that seat disrupted the natural order of things. "Sir, do not force security to remove you," Brittany said, lifting her chin. Her voice carried farther than she intended, reaching passengers who had been pretending not to watch. Phones lowered. Conversations died. The quiet was no longer polite. It was expectant. Marcus looked at the torn halves of his ticket on the floor. The rip lines were jagged, uneven, almost symbolic. He inhaled once, steady and controlled, the way a man does when every instinct tells him to stand up but every lesson from the past reminds him that silence is its own kind of power. Across the aisle, a middle-aged woman clutched her handbag tighter when Marcus looked up. Not threatening. Not dramatic. Merely looking up. And still, she flinched. Bias never needs evidence, it only needs a target. Brittany folded her arms. Since you are refusing to comply, I will have to call this in. She turned toward the intercom panel near the galley. We have a non-compliant individual in the VIP cabin, she announced in a firm, rehearsed tone. Possible fraudulent ticket. Security requested immediately. The white passenger behind her muttered, finally, and stepped closer as if preparing to take Marcus's seat as soon as he was dragged away. Mia Torres, the trainee flight attendant, stood frozen at the galley divider. She had watched the scanner flash green when Marcus boarded. She had seen his name on the verified passenger list. It was not a mistake. It was not a glitch. It was the truth. But the weight of hierarchy pressed on her shoulders like a hand gripping the back of her neck, telling her to stay quiet. Marcus finally spoke, his voice low but carrying across the rows with unnerving clarity. You did not even check the manifest. Brittany scoffed. I do not need to check anything. I know what I am looking at. She meant his clothes. She meant his skin. She meant what she thought a man like him should or should not afford. Marcus had heard that tone before. He had heard it at 23 when a hotel clerk told him he could not possibly have booked a penthouse suite. He had heard it at 31 when a real estate broker asked him if he was meeting the buyer, not realizing he was the buyer. He had heard it at 39 when a valet tried to stop him from approaching his own car because, sir, that vehicle is for VIP clients only. And now he was hearing it again, 38,000 feet below cruising altitude but inches away from the same old prejudice wrapped in a new uniform. The aisle lights flickered slightly as the aircraft systems shifted into pre-departure mode. It should have been a normal flight. It should have been routine. Instead, it became a stage. A younger man in row 4 leaned out just far enough to whisper, "This feels wrong." His seatmate replied, "It is wrong," but neither spoke loud enough to challenge Brittany. Not yet. Marcus reached down and collected the torn pieces of his ticket, not to repair them but to hold the evidence of what she had done. He lifted his gaze again, slow and deliberate. That was when Mia could no longer quiet the truth pressing against her ribs. She stepped forward, voice trembling but unmistakably clear. His ticket scanned green, she said. Brittany spun around, eyes sharp with anger. Mia, this is not your place. But Mia did not move back. It was valid. I saw it. His name is on the system. A wave of whispers moved through the cabin. The white passenger who had been ready to take Marcus's seat faltered for the first time. Brittany's jaw tightened. You are mistaken, she snapped. But her voice lacked its earlier confidence. Marcus did not smile. He did not gloat. He simply watched the truth begin to surface on its own. Because for the first time since Brittany approached him, the balance in the room shifted. Not entirely. Not safely. But enough. Enough for the storm to find its direction. The cabin did not breathe. It held its air like a lung too frightened to exhale. Brittany stared at Mia as if the young trainee had just committed an unforgivable betrayal, the kind that could end a career before it had even begun. You saw nothing, Brittany hissed, but her voice cracked at the edges. Mia swallowed hard, her hands trembling at her sides. His name is on the manifest. It's scanned green. I checked twice. Several passengers shifted in their seats, no longer pretending to ignore the confrontation. A man in row 3 muttered, "She is telling the truth," while a woman behind him whispered, "They just do not want to admit it." The white passenger waiting for Marcus's seat stepped back half an inch, uncertainty flickering across his face for the first time. Brittany noticed the shift and tried to regain control. Everyone needs to remain calm, she said, raising her voice with forced authority. We have procedures. We have policies. We cannot have unauthorized people in VIP. Marcus finally spoke again, his tone soft but unwavering. You keep using the word unauthorized, but you never checked a single record. Brittany turned toward him sharply. I do not need to check anything when someone clearly does not belong. The sentence dropped into the cabin like a weight. A woman near the window inhaled sharply. A man in the aisle seat lowered his phone, as if giving himself permission to witness without hiding it. Racial bias is not subtle when it thinks it is winning. The intercom buzzed, snapping the tension with an electronic sting. Security to VIP cabin, the voice announced. Repeat, security to VIP cabin. Brittany exhaled like she had been saved. Good, she muttered. This ends now. Marcus stayed still, posture straight, hands resting calmly on his lap. He was not afraid. He was not intimidated. He was disappointed. That was the part no one saw, but everyone felt. Mia stepped closer, voice louder this time. You cannot remove him. The system verified him. Brittany spun back around. Mia, say one more word and I will file a disciplinary report before this plane even taxis. Then file it, Mia said. Her voice shook, but her stance did not. The entire cabin froze. A young attendant had just defied her superior on an active flight. That alone made several passengers sit up straighter. A middle-aged man near the front finally spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. She is right. I saw him scan in too. Another passenger added, and ripping his ticket was out of line. Brittany's nostrils flared. Passengers do not get to decide procedure. But we see what is happening, the man replied. A ripple of agreement moved through the cabin, small but undeniable. Meanwhile, Marcus lifted his gaze and looked directly at Brittany. If your decision is based on policy, then check the policy. If it is based on something else, then say it plainly. Brittany's face lost color. Do not twist this. I am doing my job. Which part? Marcus asked quietly. Ripping tickets? Ignoring verification? Or assuming that someone like me cannot sit in seat 1A? A few passengers gasped. Others murmured under their breath. The truth was not loud, but it was heavy. Heavy enough to shift the room. The aisle lights flickered again as footsteps echoed from the front of the plane. Security was approaching. The pressure tightened around the moment. Tension pulled like a drawstring. Brittany squared her shoulders, preparing herself for what she believed would be the final step in removing Marcus. But the cabin no longer looked certain. It looked unsettled. Divided. Awake. And as the shadow of the security officer's uniform appeared at the edge of the aisle, Marcus Hale remained perfectly still, perfectly calm, and perfectly ready for the storm that was about to collide with the truth. The security officer stepped into the VIP cabin with the slow, authoritative stride of someone who was used to resolving conflicts before they escalated. His name tag read Officer Raymond Carter, and he scanned the tense cabin with trained eyes that immediately picked up the unease simmering just beneath the surface. Brittany straightened her blazer and pointed at Marcus so quickly it almost revealed her relief. Officer, that man is refusing to vacate a VIP seat. He is holding up boarding procedures and attempting to claim a fraudulent reservation. Her voice carried just a little too much triumph, as if she expected the mere presence of security to validate her decisions. Officer Carter did not move toward Marcus. Instead, he turned to Mia. She stood near the galley divider, stiff with fear and resolve. Is that true? He asked, his tone neutral but firm. Mia shook her head immediately. No, it is not. His ticket scanned green. His name is on the manifest. She tore his boarding pass before even checking the record. Murmurs broke out again. Brittany's face flushed red. You are out of line, she snapped. You do not contradict a lead attendant in front of passengers. I am contradicting a lie, Mia replied, her voice stronger now. The officer's gaze shifted back to Brittany, slow and deliberate. Did you verify the ticket before taking action? Brittany stiffened. I did not need to. Look at him. He clearly does not belong in VIP. The silence that followed was different from the silences before. This one was damning. A man in row 3 spoke up, "You did not just say that." A woman beside him added, "She really said it out loud." Officer Carter exhaled through his nose, a small, controlled breath that told everyone he had heard more than enough. But procedure required him to follow steps, even when the truth was already obvious. He turned to Marcus. "Sir, would you be willing to show identification?" Marcus nodded once and reached for his wallet with calm, measured movement. He handed over his ID without hesitation. The officer examined it, then looked back at Marcus, his brows lifting subtly. He did not say anything yet, but the shift in his eyes said plenty. Brittany noticed it too. "What is it?" she demanded. "Is it fake?" "It must be fake." Officer Carter ignored her. "Sir, do you also have your digital boarding confirmation?" Marcus handed him his phone. The officer read the screen, cross-checked the manifest on his handheld device, and then looked directly at Brittany. The weight of his stare silenced her mid-breath. "Seat 1A is assigned to Marcus Hale," he said plainly. "Verified by the system and by corporate-level clearance." Gasps erupted across the VIP cabin. Passengers straightened. Eyes widened. Someone whispered, "Corporate clearance?" "He is not just a regular VIP." Brittany's mouth opened, but no words came out. The white passenger behind her stumbled back a step, color draining from his face. Officer Carter handed Marcus's documents back with quiet respect. "Sir, thank you for cooperating." Then he turned, his tone shifting from neutral to sharp. "Ma'am, you violated protocol. You damaged a valid boarding pass without evidence. You attempted to remove a verified passenger. And you escalated a situation based on personal bias." Brittany's hands shook at her sides. "I did what I thought was right." "No," he corrected, "you acted on what you assumed." The tension in the cabin tightened like a pulled cord. Marcus sat still, gaze steady, posture dignified. He did not smirk. He did not gloat. He simply watched accountability inch closer to where it belonged. Officer Carter looked at Marcus again. "Sir, would you like to file a report?" Marcus considered the question. The entire cabin seemed to lean toward him, waiting for his answer. But before he could respond, another voice broke through the quiet. Mia, though trembling, looked Officer Carter straight in the eye. He should not have to. What happened here is obvious. And in that moment, the division in the room finally cracked. Not loudly. Not violently. But unmistakably. The truth was no longer something whispered. It had stepped fully into the light. The cabin did not simply tense. It constricted, tightening around every unspoken thought, every exchanged glance, every passenger who now fully understood that what had just happened was not a misunderstanding, not a procedural error, but a deliberate act of discrimination that had finally been dragged into the open. Officer Carter remained where he stood, shoulders squared, his attention fixed on Brittany, who looked as if the ground beneath her had begun to tilt. The white passenger behind her hovered uselessly, his earlier confidence evaporated, leaving behind only the awkwardness of someone who had benefited from prejudice without questioning it. Marcus sat motionless, the calm center of a storm that was no longer his to control. It now belonged to the room, to the witnesses, to the undeniable truth. "We are not finished," Brittany said, her voice suddenly small but desperate. He could have tampered with the system. People do that. They forge things. They sneak into places they do not belong. She spoke faster with each word, clinging to excuses as if they could undo what had already been exposed. Officer Carter raised a hand, palm out, stopping her mid-sentence. "Enough," he said. "The system logs cannot be altered by passengers. Every action requires internal authorization. His clearance level exceeds mine." Her mouth opened, then closed again, like a faulty door struggling to latch. The passengers watched, many with their phones in hand, some recording openly now. The hush that settled over the cabin was the kind that marks the exact moment people begin choosing sides. Mia stepped forward again, her voice trembling but stronger than before. "He never raised his voice," she said. "You did. He never disrespected anyone. You did. And you tried to blame him for something he did not do." A murmur spread across the cabin. "She is right," someone whispered. "This is unbelievable," said another. Brittany snapped, "You do not get to lecture me. You are a trainee, not management." Mia did not retreat. "Then management should see what actually happened." The words hit Brittany harder than anything so far. Her eyes narrowed. "You think they will believe you over me?" The question hung heavy in the air with implications too familiar, too old, and too sharp. Marcus inhaled slowly. That sentence was not new. He had heard its variations his entire life. He remembered being 12, wrongly accused of stealing headphones at a department store because a clerk insisted boys like you always take things. He remembered being 16, stopped by a school resource officer who said, "Your attitude tells me you did something." He remembered being 21, told by a professor that he must have cheated because students like you do not earn grades like this. And now, decades later, here he was again, watching the same pattern repeat itself, not because of who he was, but because of what she assumed he could not be. "Officer." Carter looked at Brittany with a stern expression that brokered no leniency. "Your statements will be documented," he said. "All of them." "You cannot do that," she protested. "Actually," he replied, "I must." The passengers shifted again, murmuring with a mixture of shock and approval. A woman in row 2 spoke aloud, "She needs to be held accountable." A man near the aisle added, "If he was not who he is, she would have dragged him off this plane." For the first time, Brittany turned fully toward Marcus, her composure gone, her voice stripped of authority. "Why did you not say who you were?" she demanded. Marcus met her gaze, unflinching. "Because I should not have to be someone powerful to be treated like someone human." The cabin erupted into a collective silence that felt like judgment itself. And in that silence, something shifted permanently, the kind of shift that cannot be undone or ignored, the kind that exposes not just one person's prejudice but the entire structure that allowed it to thrive. The silence that followed Marcus's words did not merely settle, it expanded, filling every corner of the VIP cabin with the weight of a truth nobody could escape. Officer Carter stood with his arms folded, watching Brittany with a measured, unwavering stare that signaled protocol had already shifted out of her hands. Passengers who had once avoided eye contact were now watching openly, their expressions tight with indignation and disbelief. Brittany tried to steady herself, but her voice quivered when she spoke. "This is being blown out of proportion. He made this harder than it needed to be." Marcus did not move. "All I did was sit in the seat I was assigned," he replied. "Everything else came from you." Her face flushed red, but before she could respond, the cabin speakers crackled. A soft electronic chime followed. It was a system alert. Officer Carter lifted his handheld device, scanning the notification that flashed across the screen. His posture straightened immediately. "Sir," he said to Marcus, "your account has elevated security privileges. I need to ask you something directly. Would you like me to escalate this through corporate channels?" For the first time, Brittany looked truly alarmed. "Corporate," she echoed, her voice thin. "There is no need for that. We can work this out. I can offer an apology." "An apology is not what this is about," Marcus said calmly. But the officer did not look at Brittany. He kept his eyes on Marcus, waiting for his decision. Marcus inhaled slowly, letting the breath settle the way he always had in boardrooms, negotiation chambers, and high-stakes meetings where temper was a liability and composure was a weapon. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. The screen illuminated his face with a cool glow. He tapped a single contact. A single name. A single option. The call connected immediately. "Yes, Mr. Hale," a voice answered, crisp, professional, unmistakably attentive. The murmurs across the cabin amplified. Passengers leaned in subtly. Even Officer Carter lifted his chin slightly, aware something significant was unfolding. "I need an internal review initiated immediately," Marcus said. "Flight 227. VIP cabin." "Understood," the voice responded. "Shall I activate protocol clearance?" Marcus's response was almost imperceptible, but it carried more power than any raised voice. "Yes." Brittany blinked, her breathing uneven. "Protocol what? What is he doing?" But the answer arrived before anyone could speak. Officer Carter's device pinged again. Then another ping. And another. The sound multiplied across the cabin as several flight attendants' tablets lit up simultaneously. All of them displayed the same message. "System override," Officer Carter read aloud. "Corporate level audit initiated. Lead attendant under internal review. Immediate compliance required." Brittany shook her head, panicked. "You cannot do this. You cannot just," but her words crumbled as her badge flashed red. "Not gently. Not gradually." It blinked with a harsh, unforgiving color that signaled one thing: revoked clearance. Gasps filled the cabin. "Oh my goodness," a passenger whispered. "He has that kind of authority?" "Who is this man?" another asked. Marcus did not react to the fear or shock around him. He kept his gaze on Brittany, his expression steady. "You made a decision without evidence," he said. "You acted on bias, not protocol." Her hands trembled. "I did not know who you were." Marcus's voice remained level. "You did not need to know who I was. You only needed to do your job." The memory pressed against him again, not one memory, but a collection of them, woven across years of quiet indignities that he had forced himself to rise above. Times he had been overlooked, dismissed, profiled, minimized. Times he had been told, in words or in actions, that he was out of place. He thought of himself. At 17, standing in a store as an employee, watched his every movement while ignoring the two white teenagers slipping candy into their pockets. At 28, when a venture capitalist assumed he was part of the service staff and asked him where the coffee was. At 36, when a security guard followed him to his own parking space. This moment was not isolated. It was a continuation of a pattern that had shadowed every phase of his life. But this time, he was not that young man anymore. He was the one with the power to end the pattern. And he was done staying silent. The cabin seemed to pulse with a living silence, the kind that grows heavier with every passing second. Brittany stood frozen, her revoked badge still blinking red against her uniform, an undeniable announcement that her authority had collapsed in front of everyone. Passengers watched with wide eyes, their whispers no longer shy or uncertain but bold and unfiltered. Officer Carter lowered his device slowly, absorbing the magnitude of the override that had just swept through the system. "Mr. Hale," he said carefully, "corporate audit teams have acknowledged the activation. They are requesting confirmation of how you would like to proceed." That sentence alone made Brittany's knees weaken. She steadied herself on the back of the seat in front of her. "He cannot make that decision," she said, voice cracking under the strain. "He is a passenger. He cannot possibly have that kind of power." Marcus looked up at her with a calm that only made her more unsettled. "You assumed I did not belong here. Now you are learning what assumptions cost." Her breath caught, her face draining of color. "I did not mean to disrespect you." "But you did," a man in row 3 said loudly. "We all saw it." "You ripped his ticket," added a woman near the window. "You did not check anything." Another voice rose from farther back. "If Mia did not speak up, you would have kicked him out of his rightful seat." Brittany's head whipped toward the passengers, frustration dissolving into panic. "You do not understand. This situation is complicated. It is not what it looks like." Officer Carter's voice cut through her excuses. "It is exactly what it looks like." Marcus positioned his phone on his knee, the quiet glow of the screen illuminating his fingertips. The voice. On the other end of the line remained connected, waiting for instruction. "Mr. Hale," the voice said again, "corporate teams are standing by. Your authorization is required." Brittany swallowed hard. "You are not really going to escalate this further, are you? You have already embarrassed me." Marcus looked up slowly, the weight of decades of similar moments pressing behind his eyes. "I did not embarrass you," he said. "Your actions did that." She blinked rapidly, her voice trembling. "If I had known you were someone important," Marcus lifted a hand, silencing her with the smallest gesture. "That is the problem. You believe respect is owed only to people you consider important." The cabin fell completely silent again. Even the hum of the engines seemed quieter. He continued, his tone deep but steady. "I will make something very clear. You did not treat me this way because you thought I was unimportant. You treated me this way because you saw my skin and decided that was all you needed to know." Passengers inhaled sharply, the truth landing with undeniable force. Brittany shook her head, tears forming at the corners of her eyes. "I did not mean you did," Marcus said. "You just did not expect consequences." Officer Carter cleared his throat. "Sir, what is your decision?" Marcus lifted the phone to his ear. "Proceed." The voice on the other end responded without hesitation. "Understood. Executing protocol now." Brittany stepped back, horrified. "Please. Do not do this." But the system had already begun to update. Her badge blinked faster, then went completely dark. Her tablet shut off. The device on her wrist vibrated once, then displayed a final message. "Access permanently revoked." Gasps rose again. One woman whispered, "This is happening in real time." Another murmured, "I have never seen anything like this." The white passenger who had expected to take Marcus's seat sat down heavily in the nearest empty row, unable to look up. Brittany let out a trembling exhale. "Please," she repeated softly. "I will lose everything." Marcus did not raise his voice. He did not gloat. He did not inflict cruelty. He simply stated the truth. "You nearly made me lose something too. My dignity. My safety. My humanity. And that is something I will no longer allow anyone to take." He placed his phone back on his knee, the call still connected but silent now, awaiting the next instruction. And in that moment, every passenger knew that the story unfolding before them was no longer about a seat or a procedure. It was about justice arriving in a place that had tried, once again, to deny it. The moment Brittany's badge went dark, the atmosphere inside the VIP cabin shifted from tense to electric, as if every molecule in the air recognized that a line had been crossed and justice had finally taken its first step forward. Passengers who had been silent witnesses now leaned closer, not out of curiosity but out of a quiet, collective acknowledgement that something profoundly overdue was unfolding right before them. Officer Carter kept his stance neutral, but the rigidity in his posture revealed that even he understood the gravity of the protocol now moving through the corporate system behind Marcus's single command. The officer's device vibrated again, displaying updated notifications. He read them silently, his eyes widening just enough to show that even he was startled by the layers of authority Marcus possessed. Brittany staggered backward until the back of her legs bumped against a seat. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "This cannot be happening. I have worked here for 9 years." "9 years of what?" someone muttered from row 3. 9 years of profiling people? The white passenger who had expected to take Marcus's seat cleared his throat, visibly uncomfortable. "Maybe we should all calm down," he said weakly. It was the kind of suggestion that only arrives after the consequences begin. A woman across the aisle responded sharply, "You were ready to sit in his seat the moment she pushed him out of it. You did not tell anyone to calm down then." The man had no answer. He looked down at his hands, suddenly ashamed. Meanwhile, Marcus remained still, composed, unhurried, as if every second was unfolding exactly the way it was meant to. He lifted his phone slightly. The voice on the other end spoke again. "Mr. Hale, corporate headquarters is on standby." We can proceed with level 3 action or escalate to level 4. Please confirm. Gasps echoed across the cabin at the mention of levels. Passengers exchanged looks, realizing this was not ordinary authority. This was executive power, the kind that could reshape entire departments. Brittany's breathing quickened. Sir. Mr. Hale. I am begging you. I have a family. I did not think that, Marcus said quietly, is the problem. You did not think, because you believed there would never be consequences. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of every moment in his life when someone had tried to take something from him simply because he dared to exist where they thought he did not belong. Officer Carter stepped forward. Mr. Hale, he said, to ensure the process is documented correctly, I need to inform you that any action at Level 3 will result in formal termination. Level 4 involves full departmental audit and immediate removal of staff leadership. Brittany clasped her hands together, devastation carving deep lines across her face. I am sorry, she whispered. I am truly sorry. Marcus looked at her for a long, quiet moment. The cabin held its breath. Finally, he lifted the phone fully to his ear. Initiate Level 3. The voice responded instantly. Confirmed. Executing now. Brittany gasped as her wrist device vibrated violently once, displaying a final message. Employment terminated. Access denied. Return company property. Her knees buckled, and she sank into the nearest seat, stunned. Her world had just collapsed in less than a minute. A few passengers whispered, she earned that, while others murmured, it is harsh, but it is fair. Mia, the trainee who had spoken up, stepped forward slowly, her voice soft but steady. Sir. I just want to say, thank you. Marcus shook his head. Do not thank me. You told the truth. That is all. Officer Carter nodded respectfully. Sir, your decision has been logged. Corporate will handle the follow-up. Is there anything else you need? Marcus looked around the cabin, at the faces that had watched everything unfold, at the people who had witnessed injustice and then witnessed justice rise to meet it. Yes, he said calmly. I need this flight to depart on time. And with that single line, the power dynamic in the cabin settled into its rightful place. Not loud. Not boastful. Just resolute, unshakable, and unmistakably earned. The tension inside the VIP cabin did not dissipate after Marcus's quiet command. It reshaped itself, settling into a mixture of awe, disbelief, and a dawning sense of accountability that clung to every passenger like static in the air. The flight attendants who remained on duty stood straighter, suddenly aware that their actions were being evaluated not only by corporate headquarters but by the eyes of an entire cabin that had just witnessed a collapse of authority and the rise of a truth no one could ignore. Officer Carter checked his device once more, confirming that the termination notice for Brittany had fully processed. The lead attendant sat slumped in a seat several rows back, her hands trembling, her eyes red as she stared blankly ahead. No one approached her. No one defended her. She had crossed a line that could no longer be blurred, softened, or excused. The white passenger who had hoped to take Marcus's seat leaned forward cautiously. Sir. I just want to say, he paused, searching for words he had never needed to use before. I did not realize what was happening. I should not have assumed. Marcus lifted his gaze, steady and unreadable. Assumptions are choices, he said. You made yours. The man swallowed hard and nodded, understanding that the conversation was over. He sank back into his seat. Meanwhile, Mia adjusted her uniform nervously and approached Marcus's row. Sir, would you like a fresh boarding pass? She asked. I can reprint it from the handheld terminal. Marcus nodded. Thank you. She began entering the data into the device, her trembling fingers betraying the adrenaline still coursing through her system. I am sorry this happened, she said quietly. It should not happen to anyone. Marcus responded with a quiet certainty. It happened because too many people stayed quiet for too long. She nodded, her eyes softening with understanding. I will not be quiet again. After handing him the new boarding pass, Mia stepped back as Officer Carter approached. "Mr. Hale," the officer said, "Corporate Communications has sent a message. They have confirmed they are opening a formal investigation into training practices, leadership protocols, and incident handling procedures for this flight and team. They have also acknowledged your decision regarding the termination." Marcus offered a slight nod. "Thank you for informing me. If there is anything else you need before departure," the officer added, "we will accommodate it." "There is nothing else," Marcus replied. "I simply expect the flight to continue without further incident." The officer gave a respectful nod and stepped aside. Passengers remained transfixed, their eyes shifting between Marcus and the remnants of authority around him, some still processing that the man they saw sitting quietly moments ago now wielded the kind of influence that could trigger system overrides and internal investigations with a single command. The intercom chimed. A new attendant, one who had remained silent until now, cleared her throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are preparing for final cabin checks. Please fasten your seatbelts and ensure all personal items are properly stowed." Her voice was steady, but the undertone carried a reverent caution, as if she understood that the cabin had transformed into something more than a space for travel. It had become a courtroom, a spotlight, and a crossroads all at once. As the crew began moving through the aisles, passengers continued whispering. "I have never seen anything like this," someone murmured. "He handled it without raising his voice," another whispered. "That is real power." Marcus rested his hands on his lap, allowing the calm to resettle within him. This was not victory. This was not triumph. This was balance. This was correction. This was what happens when the truth refuses to remain buried. And as the engines hummed louder, preparing the aircraft for departure, every person in that cabin understood one thing: they would never forget what they had witnessed today. The aircraft eased into a hush that felt almost ceremonial, as if the entire cabin was holding a shared breath while the gravity of everything that had happened settled into its final shape. Outside the windows, the late afternoon sun washed the tarmac in gold, but inside, the atmosphere carried the weight of a story that every passenger knew they would retell for years. Mia finished her walkthrough and gave Marcus a small, respectful nod before moving on. Her steps were steadier now, no longer hesitant, no longer silenced by fear of authority. She had seen what silence costs, and she had found her voice in the middle of a storm. Marcus watched her for a moment, appreciating the quiet courage she had discovered. He rested back in seat 1A, the seat that had started the entire confrontation, and folded the newly printed boarding pass between his fingers. It was crisp, unwrinkled, untainted by bias or arrogance. It was what it should have been from the start, proof of belonging that should never have had to prove anything. A few rows behind him, a woman leaned forward and whispered to her seatmate, "I do not think I will ever forget the way he stayed calm through everything." Her seatmate nodded. He held more authority in his silence than she ever did in her shouting. The engines rumbled softly beneath them as the aircraft prepared for pushback. Officer Carter approached Marcus one last time. "Mr. Hale," he said with the quiet respect usually reserved for senior executives, "corporate has acknowledged the protocol completion. They will notify you of the follow-up after the flight. For now, everything is in order for departure." Marcus nodded once. "Thank you, officer." The officer hesitated before speaking again. "For what it is worth, I am sorry that this happened on my watch." "It should not have." Marcus met his gaze. "It did not happen on your watch. It happened because it has been happening for a very long time. Today, it was simply visible." The officer accepted the truth with a solemn nod and stepped away. The last few passengers adjusted their belts, still glancing toward Marcus with expressions that carried admiration, discomfort, guilt, and relief all woven together. They had witnessed prejudice unfold, but they had also witnessed what it looks like when someone with power answers injustice with restraint rather than retaliation. The intercom clicked on. "Cabin crew, prepare doors for departure." The attendants moved into position. The doors sealed with a heavy finality, the sound echoing through the cabin like the closing of a chapter. As the plane began to glide away from the gate, the white passenger who had nearly taken Marcus's seat finally spoke again, quietly but sincerely. Mr. Hale, he said from across the aisle, I hope you know, some of us learned something today. Marcus did not turn his head. He did not answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, steady, and unmistakably resolved. Learning is a start, he said. Changing is the rest. The engines roared louder, and the aircraft lifted from the ground, carrying every soul on board into the sky. And as the cabin tilted upward, the weight of what had happened remained behind them on the tarmac, but the lesson, the moment, and the truth rose with them, impossible to forget, impossible to deny, and impossible to ignore ever again. The plane steadied as it reached cruising altitude, the soft chime of the cabin signal echoing through the aisles like a gentle reminder that, despite everything, this was still a flight, still a journey, still a space suspended between two places. Yet for the passengers seated in that VIP cabin, the real journey had already taken place on the ground, in the confrontation they had witnessed, in the truth they could no longer unsee. Marcus sat with his hands loosely clasped, eyes focused on the clouds beyond the window. The world outside was quiet, expansive, untouched by bias or assumption. Up here, there were no stolen seats, no torn tickets, no accusations wrapped in politeness. Just sky. But inside the cabin, the weight of what had unfolded lingered in every breath, every glance, every ripple of discomfort and newfound awareness. A woman seated across the aisle leaned toward her husband and whispered, "He handled the whole thing with such grace." Her husband nodded. He should not have had to. 2 rows back, a group of business travelers stared at their laptops, screens forgotten, faces solemn. One of them murmured, "If a man like him gets treated that way, imagine what happens to people without power." His colleague responded quietly, "Maybe that is the point. Maybe that is why he handled it the way he did." Mia walked slowly past Marcus's seat, performing her in-flight duties with more confidence than she had felt earlier. She paused, lowering her voice. "If you need anything at all, please let me know." "I mean that." Marcus nodded with gratitude. "You did the right thing," he said. "Do not let anyone make you doubt that." She smiled softly before moving on. Officer Carter, seated temporarily in a jump seat nearby, watched Marcus with a thoughtful expression. After a moment of deliberation, he approached. "Mr. Hale," he said quietly, "I wanted to check if you are comfortable continuing the rest of this flight. Given what happened, I wanted to be sure you feel safe." Marcus turned his head slightly. "Safety is not my concern," he replied. "Recognition is." The officer hesitated. "Recognition of what?" Marcus looked down at the newly printed boarding pass in his hand, the crisp edges a stark contrast to the torn remnants on the floor earlier. "Recognition that what happened did not start today. Recognition that prejudice does not need a reason, only an opportunity. And recognition that silence, especially from those in power, is part of the problem." The officer absorbed the words quietly, nodding. "I understand," he said. "And I will report everything exactly as it happened." Marcus gave him a calm, resolute nod. "Thank you." As Officer Carter stepped away, the white passenger who had nearly claimed Marcus's seat cleared his throat. "Mr. Hale," he said from across the aisle, I want to apologize. I should have spoken up earlier. I saw what was happening, and I did nothing. That was wrong." Marcus regarded him steadily, neither harsh nor forgiving, simply honest. "An apology is the first step," he said. "The next is choosing to act differently when no one is watching." The man nodded, humbled. "I understand." For a long moment, the cabin fell into a reflective silence, each person lost in their own thoughts. Some replayed what they had seen. Others confronted their own biases. Others simply sat in the quiet, absorbing the magnitude of a truth they could no longer deny. Outside, the sun dipped lower, staining the clouds in streaks of gold and amber. The aircraft glided forward, slicing through layers of atmosphere with steady purpose. Inside, the passengers moved through their own layers, shedding assumptions, confronting discomfort, finding clarity. As the light outside softened, Marcus closed his eyes briefly, not to rest but to breathe. He had not raised his voice. He had not needed to. His presence, his patience, his refusal to accept disrespect as an inevitability had carried more authority than any argument ever could. And as the plane sailed forward, everyone in that cabin knew one thing without speaking it out loud: this flight had changed them. Maybe not completely. Maybe not perfectly. But undeniably and permanently. And sometimes, that is where transformation truly begins. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as the sun slipped beneath the clouds, casting the interior in a warm, amber glow that felt softer, calmer, and somehow more honest than the light that had filled it earlier. What had begun as a routine flight had evolved into a mirror, reflecting uncomfortable truths, exposing hidden assumptions, and revealing the quiet power of dignity held steady in the face of discrimination. Marcus remained seated in 1A, his posture relaxed but his presence unmistakably grounded, as if he had anchored the entire cabin with nothing more than restraint and unshakable composure. He gazed out the window, watching the horizon stretch endlessly ahead, a reminder of how far he had come and how much further the world still had to go. Passengers occasionally glanced his way, not out of curiosity now, but out of respect. Real respect. Earned not through title, wealth, or power, but through the way he carried himself when injustice tried to strip him of his humanity. A soft chime signaled that beverage service would begin, and Mia approached with renewed purpose in her steps. When she reached Marcus's row, she paused slightly. "Mr. Hale," she said gently, "may I offer you something to drink?" "Anything you would like." Marcus looked up and gave her a small nod. "Water will be fine, thank you." She poured it with care, placing the glass on his tray table with a level of attentiveness that came not from fear but from genuine respect. "I want you to know," she added softly, "that I will remember what happened today. And I will not pretend I did not see it." Marcus gave her a warm but steady look. "Never underestimate the power of choosing to see," he said. She held his gaze for a moment, then nodded and stepped away, her movements lighter, as if the truth she had spoken had lifted some weight from her shoulders. As she continued down the aisle, Marcus sensed someone approaching from behind. The white passenger who had nearly taken his seat stood there, clutching a drink napkin nervously between his fingers. "Mr. Hale," he said, "I know I apologized earlier, but I want to say it properly. I judged the situation before I understood it. That was wrong. You deserved better from everyone here, including me." Marcus studied him briefly. There was sincerity in the man's eyes, a discomfort that came from recognizing his own complicity, however passive it had been. "What matters," Marcus replied, "is that you are not ignoring it now. Awareness means nothing if it does not lead to action." The man let out a breath, almost a release. "I understand," he said quietly, then returned to his seat with a posture more thoughtful than before. A few rows back, two business travelers whispered about corporate culture, ethics, and implicit bias. Another couple discussed the responsibility of bystanders. It was uncomfortable for some, illuminating for others, necessary for all. The turbulence that followed was mild, barely a shake, but the cabin reacted with a unity that had not been present earlier. Shared tension. Shared release. Shared understanding. The transformation was subtle but undeniable. As the aircraft began its descent, the captain's voice filled the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will begin landing shortly. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts." The attendants repeated the instructions, their voices steadier, more grounded. Officer Carter approached once more. "Mr. Hale," he said, "corporate has confirmed that a formal statement will be issued, and they will follow up with you directly. I want to thank you again for the way you handled everything." Marcus nodded. "Thank you for listening." As the plane lowered through the clouds, the city lights began to twinkle beneath them like scattered embers. The moment felt symbolic, a reminder that even in darkness, illumination is possible. When the wheels touched the runway, a ripple of relief moved through the cabin. Passengers collected their belongings with a quiet reverence, still processing the journey that had unfolded in the air. As Marcus stood and gathered his items, the passengers in the VIP cabin did something no one expected. They stepped aside. They made space for him. Not out of fear. Not out of formality. Out of respect. He walked down the aisle with calm assurance, and as he passed, one of the business travelers said softly, "You did not raise your voice, but you raised the standard." Marcus paused just long enough to acknowledge the words. "Standards should never be lowered just because expectations are," he replied. And with that, he stepped off the plane, leaving behind not just a flight number or a resolved incident, but a message that echoed in the minds of every person on board: dignity does not demand permission, it demands presence. And today, presence had prevailed.